So to start, I just want to give a quick introduction to our organization. IPS, or Institute for Public Strategies, has been a national leader in creating safe, vibrant, and healthy communities where everyone can thrive. We work alongside our communities to build power, challenge systems of inequity, and protect health. Our mission is to partner with communities to create that lasting systemic change that really advocates for the social, economic, political, cultural, and physical conditions that promote health and well-being. We focus on helping people find their voice, building collective power to create the change they want to see in their communities. So we've worked with communities, government entities, and other organizations across the country, designing prevention programs and providing the tools needed to build healthier, stronger communities. So today we're thrilled to have you as we explore how adult allies working alongside youth can drive meaningful change in their communities through coalition building, event planning, and advocacy. So the session was really hoping to provide those practical steps, real-world success stories, and valuable insights from our presenters to help those adult allies working with young leaders make a difference. And before we dive in to the content, I do want to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. They bring a wealth of experience and knowledge in youth engagement, coalition building, and advocacy. So I'm going to pass it to Jennifer first to introduce herself and go from there.
So hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Lagunas Garcia. I am the Youth Coordinator for Youth in Action Jóvenes en Acción program here at the Institute for Public Strategies. And I'll pass it over to Venture.
Hi everyone, my name is Venture Griswold. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. And I am a prevention specialist at IPS. And I co-chair the Visionary Leaders in Action Youth Coalition with Gabriel. I'll pass it to Gabriel.
Thank you, Venture. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name is Gabriel Hill. I'm the program manager here at Institute for Public Strategies, and I also co-chair the Youth Coalition Visionary Leaders in Action with Venture, and I'm happy to be here today with you all. And I'll pass it back over to Brittany.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you all for your introductions. And I realized that our chat function was disabled for a second, so it is enabled now. You are able to introduce yourself, tell us where you're coming from. Apologies for that. So thank you all for the introductions. I appreciate you guys being here and sharing your insights. And so with that, I'm excited to jump in and hand the mic over to Jennifer.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you again for coming. Before we get started with the actual presentation, we do want to start off by asking you all a question real quick. I think there's a poll that's supposed to pop up on your screen right now. The question being, what is the biggest challenge that you face when working with youth in coalition building efforts? So we'll give you guys a couple of seconds to answer that question. All right, so it looks like most of you all feel like your biggest challenge is having a difficulty engaging youth. Hopefully throughout this presentation, you all get some tips and some words of encouragement that are gonna help you all sort of engage the youth that you're looking for. And with that, we'll get started with the presentation. All right, so just starting off, we want to start off the presentation with giving you all an idea and a whole perspective of why youth are so important when it comes to driving change. So the power of youth coalitions, right? So today we're going to see a lot of words like engagement, mobilization, and community, all of which are really crucial to youth coalitions work. And at the heart of these efforts is youth-driven activism, which flourishes through collaboration and collective action. So what we've seen with youth is that the key tools to youth is to sort of use digital engagement as a way to reach a broader audience, right? So their energy and passion fuels events and campaigns that spark meaningful change and long-lasting change. So going back to the digital engagement, platforms like Instagram and TikTok, they've enabled youth coalitions to connect with a broader audience and create campaigns that resonate with young people's lived experiences. And it also helps them push their message further. So this digital reach has been instrumental in raising awareness and gathering support for their causes, but it's not just about having an online presence. Youth coalitions also excel at mobilizing within their community. So this ability that they have to rally people is one of their biggest strengths, right? They bring fresh ideas and perspectives that might otherwise go unnoticed if it's just a group of adults trying to engage youth. And another critical element of these coalitions is intersectionality. So, by including diverse voices and perspectives, youth ensure that their solutions are inclusive and that they address the full scope of social issues at hand. So, engaging youth in these efforts is not only drives the immediate change, but it also sustains the momentum that they need in order to keep pushing forward and keep moving forward. So, in essence, youth coalitions foster a strong sense of community and a shared purpose. By working together towards a common goal, they are making a significant stride in shaping more equitable futures. And with that, we do want to go into two success stories that we've seen. And within IPS youth programs, we've seen some inspiring wins that have been driven by young people in the community. So IPS's South Bay Youth for Change students at Mar Vista High School, they championed a social host ordinance in Imperial Beach that deters adults from hosting parties where minors can drink alcohol. Our second success story is in Santa Monica and Culver City. Youth advocated for a school safety plan that resulted in Narcan being readily available on campus if an individual is experiencing an overdose. So now that we have, a whole idea of why youth empowerment is so important, and we have these success stories of what youth are capable of, we're now going to shift our focus onto how these outcomes were made possible through strong coalition building. So we'll go into, I guess, like the Youth Coalition Building 101. We'll be giving you all some tips on how to build these coalitions and how to really engage the youth in the work that they want to do. So for these students to succeed in their efforts, adult allies have to figure out a way for young people to really recognize the problems that are currently occurring in their community and how they'd like to address it, right? So there isn't a step-by-step guide that's going to guarantee the success of a program, but these are some tips on how to get started and just some things that have worked for programs like the Youth in Action Jóvenes en Acción program. So the first tip we have is hosting listening sessions or just focus groups. Um, they're the focus groups and the listening sessions are just a really great way for us to speak to youth on a more, I guess, casual level. It's not like you're teaching them anything. It's really just a place for us to hear their experiences and to hear their voices, right? So finding out key issues during these listening sessions, possible solutions, and what they need in order to be involved in a youth coalition. So listening sessions or focus groups, they shouldn't be at the start of a program. We do consider it a best practice to host them annually with new and existing youth from our program. So approaching it this way ensures that the program is driven by the youth and isn't just focused on the deliverables that the program has, but rather provides flexibility to address the needs of youth and their community. So when you host listening sessions or focus groups, make sure that you're offering various options. Make sure that some of the focus groups will be in person, some will be virtual, some will be individual or even group, or just hosting creative sessions in order to collect information from a diverse group of young people. And then moving on to our second main tip, forming a youth advisory board or council at the beginning is extremely important as well. So at the beginning of our Youth in Action program, we did want our program to be well informed by youth and the coalition to be driven by youth. So we developed a youth advisory board of 5, all of which would receive a $500 stipend at the end of their term. And we were able to pay these with our program funds, but for those programs that are a little bit more restrictive, we do encourage you to look for small grant opportunities that can act as supplemental funds for your program. So what we did is we advertised this opportunity at our local middle and high schools. Youth were asked to submit a application via Google Forms, and all of the applicants were interviewed. We did receive around, I think, over 30 applicants. We selected 5 from those, and we received an actual signed agreement from 3 of them. So this was just one lesson learned on our end, to plan for things not to work out with those that you selected due to scheduling issues or other commitments. Youth can be very ambitious sometimes and they want to say yes to everything, but sometimes that's not the way that it works. So it is a great idea to have alternates if it's possible. If someone can't commit, having someone else who can step into that role. So our youth advisory board ended up being only a team of three, but they did stay with us for the entire year and they really helped us shape the programming that we currently offer. So this is just kind of how to get our youth coalition started. And then in order to sustain a youth coalition, we also have some tips for that. So making sure that you plan programming that meets youth where they are and that reduces as many barriers in their involvement as possible. So thinking about things like transportation, right? If it's possible and if it's needed, make sure that you're offering some rides. Sometimes students want to do everything. It's just the transportation that's an issue, and that really has helped at least our program engage with youth. Timing is also extremely important. So think about the time of day and the day of the week that works best for youth. Giving options again, so like hosting hybrid meetings. Some youth prefer to meet virtually, some want to be in person and want to connect in person. And if you are having these meetings in person, making sure that we always provide food. That is a big plus to getting youth involved in your coalitions and staying. So you want to make sure to cultivate an environment where youth make the decisions, right? Figure out a consistent schedule that enhances their ability to participate. Be patient and be consistent, adjust as needed. So for Youth in Action, our programming in the summer looks very different than when school is in session. Our forms of communication are different. Sometimes we use email, sometimes we use platforms like WhatsApp, and sometimes we just update them on our Instagram. So making sure that you, again, find youth where they're at, changing the meeting times if needed, changing the location if needed. So those are just, some ways to keep the youth, to come back, making sure that you listen to what they're saying. So in order to maintain engagement and long-term sustainability, we do want to make sure that we celebrate all the small wins along the way, especially if you're working with policy work. So consistently check in and get feedback from the youth, show up for them, keep that creativity alive and go with their flow. Lastly, make sure that we're offering incentives like stipends, gift cards, certificates of completion, social media recognition posts, just anything to continue to encourage them to keep going. And some additional tips that we want to throw out there is to avoid gatekeeping. So sometimes participants want to participate in different sections, and that's fine, So try partnering with other youth serving organizations to find collaborative ways to meet youth needs holistically. And then another thing we wanted to throw out there was how to keep enthusiasm amongst program staff during youth programming. So if you are in a leadership position, making sure that you're having weekly check-ins with staff so that they feel supported. Frequent debriefs to help identify where adjustments or additional support might be needed, and each youth group, programs, meetings, events, we've had times where no one has showed up. And that's going to happen sometimes, and that's okay. Please don't feel discouraged. Instead, use that as an opportunity to lean into honest discussions with your team to identify potential reasons that could be causing this gap. And it's also highly recommended to consult youth that you're already engaged with to sort of get some insight from them and let them be part of that planning process.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we heard from Jennifer some quick tips on forming and sustaining a coalition. Now let's talk about what you can do when youth start bringing ideas to host events, whether it's a cleanup in the community, distributing supplies in the community, or creating events that will help recruit additional youth. Planning youth-led events can be highly impactful when done thoughtfully. One of the most important things to remember is that youth-led means exactly that. The event is planned and executed with youth at the helm. This requires us, as adults and facilitators, to step back and allow young people to take charge, providing support and guidance as needed. So we've got another poll for you. And how do you set up for success? How often do you involve youth in event planning processes for your organization? Always, sometimes, rarely, never. Give you a few seconds to answer. All right, it looks like there's a good mix across the board, but for the majority, it's sometimes youth input is considered. That's great. And we're seeing for 22% of y'all, youth are leading the process. That's really exciting. I'm really glad you're here. And I'm sure that you'd have lots to teach if you were running this webinar. So thank you for showing up. All right, thank you, everyone. So now let's look at best practices for organizing youth-led events. It starts by engaging the youth you're working with early in the planning process. For example, as Jennifer was mentioning, focus groups and listening sessions leading up to our youth summit provided critical insights. This is where you can gather input directly from the youth about what they want to see at the event. For many of our youth-led or youth-focused events at IPS, we host listening sessions or focus groups to understand what topics are important to our young participants. This feedback is invaluable. It helps us shape the agenda to ensure it resonates with them and addresses their needs and interests. So when you are gathering participants, you definitely want to cast a wide net when recruiting for listening sessions and focus groups, because of course, the more diverse the group, the better quality of answers you'll receive with better data to represent youth in your community. Teens can be hard to get a hold of, so leveraging the connections of your existing members is a strong place to start. See if each member can bring at least 2 friends and encourage them to promote the event in any of their clubs or teams at school. Provide youth with an eye-catching flyer that they can share at their school, and if possible, pass out flyers in person at local events. Then use your own connections to promote the event via your email listserv and on your social media. This gives you the best possible chance of having a full and diverse group of participants. When hosting our last input session, we were lucky enough to get students from 3 different schools, in part because we were able to flyer at resource fairs for those schools. So then we get to setting up for the listening session. When creating questions for the input session, you want to have a variety of question styles that find a balance between giving teens plenty of space to share their ideas without overtaxing them. That's why it's great to have a mix of open-ended questions where you can get really qualitative answers that can shape the direction of your coalition, and multiple choice questions that can provide you with more specific data about how the majority of the group is thinking. So here's an example of 2 of our qualitative open-ended questions for teens. What are your ideas for the future of VLA? That's Visionary Leaders in Action, our youth program. And what personal goals do you hope to achieve through participating in VLA activities? So a multiple choice question to balance these out might be, which of these should our coalition focus most of our energy on this year? A, policy, B, workshops, C, social media education, D, creating a PSA. Then you're leaving space for the teens to brainstorm their own ideas, but also guiding them towards what some possibilities might be. It's also important to consider asking questions around logistics. When is the best time to meet? In our case, we held events on Saturday mornings and Wednesday evenings and had a decent turnout. Our colleagues in other regions have youth who prefer meeting on Tuesday and Friday nights. So it really varies within each community, and it's important to hear directly from the youth you're working with. Youth can also provide insight into how long the event should be before teens lose interest. Consider using this time to also brainstorm around the location of the event promotion, and engagement strategies. It's important to provide a framework for the input session that allows youth to lead and to take ownership of the event. I'll now pass it over to my colleague, Gabriel.
Thank you, Venture. So now it's the day of the focus group or the listening sessions, and you have students registered, an agenda created, and questions drafted to help guide your input session. So let's talk about the day of. Before the focus group, it's important to cover logistics. If you have a virtual session, make sure that you test the Zoom. If it's in person, prepare the agenda materials and arrange the room to create a setting conducive to productive conversations. This allows you to identify and resolve any issues that could disrupt the actual event. Consider playing background music as students join the session to create a relaxed and welcoming atmosphere. Setting the right tone from the start helps participants feel comfortable and engaged. Talking about engaging the participation. Begin the session by displaying welcome signs, outline the agenda, objectives, and the guidelines to set clear expectations for participants. This is also a great time to present group agreements, either previously set forth by the youth you are currently working with or the group that's currently there. This helps everyone to be on the same page. It creates meaningful and respectful dialogue as well. And as youth enter the room, be sure to have them sign in. After welcoming everyone, going over the agenda, building an interactive portion. So you'll have you filled out questionnaires or participate in polls. Both are easy way to gather feedback. Encourage everyone to participate, emphasizing that their input is valuable and often anonymous. Make sure you clearly instruct participants on assessing and completing the questionnaire or polls. And note any time limits or specific sessions that you want them to look at. Afterwards, you want to smoothly transition into the Q&A and open discussion segments, inviting participants to ask questions or share their thoughts. It is important to emphasize this is an open forum for all contributions and encourage active engagement. Staff should be prepared to feel comfortable moderating and discussing things that are going to go on. Managing your time to ensure that the group is able to make it through the agenda and that all voices are heard. Before concluding, share any important announcements such as upcoming events or follow-up tasks and clearly outline the next steps, including access to session recordings, future meeting details, and who's in charge of which items, whether it's staff or the youth. Now we're going to go into follow-up actions. The focus group feedback is essential to shaping the upcoming youth-led events. So use their suggestions to inform your agenda, prioritizing issues they care about, ensuring that the event aligns with their interests. This includes the themes they want to explore, the format of the session, and any guest speakers or facilitators they'd like to have. You can also provide valuable suggestions for locations and timing of your event. They can provide insight into spaces where you feel most comfortable and they're likely to attend. They can also offer creative ideas to keep their peers engaged, such as interactive workshops, games, or social media, which challenge them to help promote the actual events. For those youth who express interest and to continue to be involved, and you will have some that want to be involved in the planning process, staff should work with them to finalize the details of the event, from logistics to promotion. Their ongoing involvement is key to making the event truly youth-led. Staff can support by providing structure and resources to help the youth stay organized and on track. This includes setting clear deadlines, helping with communication, offering guidance on planning and execution. It's also important to ensure they have access to essential tools like meeting spaces, supplies, and promotional channels, allowing their ideals to come to life without any obstacles. I'm gonna pass it back over to Venture.
Thank you, Gabriel. So we've seen successful initiatives where youth were given the chance to lead, and we'd like to walk you through one of our most recent events in Los Angeles, our SWIFT Youth Summit, which took place in June. Now, SWIFT stands for Substance Prevention and Wellness Initiatives for Future Transformation, and that title actually came from a youth in our focus group. So that was really exciting to get such a dynamic name for the event directly from youth. Over the next few slides, we'll walk you through our planning process, the challenges we encountered, and the successes we achieved. We'll also highlight key takeaways and lessons learned that can be applied to future events, and hopefully by hearing a real-world example from us, it might help you give you ideas for your own projects. So, most important thing is planning consistently for a successful event. The SWIFT Summit was conceptualized to meet a program deliverable requirement for a youth-focused town hall or other event, but aside from adults providing the framework for the event, all workshop topics were supplied by youth in our coalition. The goals for the summit were to educate youth about substance use disorder prevention, provide alternative outlets to substance use, and provide space for youth to meet and network to discuss the issues in their communities that matter to them. Planning an event of this scale is a lot of work. For the SWIFT Summit, we had about 3 total months to plan before the big day itself. So it can be done with that little time. However, we also know from experience that a few elements of planning would have gone a little more smoothly with more time. So we would recommend starting more like 5 to 6 months in advance if you can, beginning with securing your event date and location. It takes a large group to actually make the event happen, but it's great to have a core planning team of 3 to 5 staff to oversee logistics and do creative brainstorming together. We gave each person a primary responsibility, such as securing the location, securing speakers, working on promotion and media attention, and fundraising. While each person was the point of contact for their assigned responsibility, we shared the burdens all around by using our connections and expertise to get the job done together. We had a standing 90-minute weekly meeting with more frequent meetings immediately leading up to the event. You're also going to want to connect with diverse partners for your event. For our Swift Summit, we worked with 6 nonprofit organizations, 2 city governments, 1 county department, 2 neighborhood coalitions, and 2 corporate partners. Wrangling all these partners was a lot of work, but it really enriched our event to have so many different resources and perspectives. Our nonprofit partners were very helpful in leading and creating our workshops for the event, on top of the ones we led through our own organization. Many of these were existing partnerships, and we were lucky that these partners could donate their time to help us keep our event costs down. We also had a nonprofit partner provide our keynote speaker, who was able to speak to his own lived experience of being previously unhoused and a drug user, and his journey to now being a social services provider. Knowing he was speaking from his true story really inspired our youth, and several people said it was what they enjoyed most about the event. When it comes to securing an event space, start as early as possible and again, cast a wide net. We were looking for spaces with low or no fees, primarily focused on community centers, high school or college campuses, or spaces from other nonprofits. We ended up using multiple buildings at a community center in a local public park, which was a great space for us. Then you get to the day of the event. As I mentioned before, it takes a village to make this kind of event happen, and day of volunteers were absolutely critical to the success of our event. We called upon fellow IPS coworkers in addition to existing volunteers who signed up for 1 or more 2-hour shifts across the day. Some of the most important roles included staffing the registration and welcome desk to keep track of and greet attendees, supporting guest speakers and workshop facilitators, both before and during their workshops, a dedicated social media team, shout out Brittany, to document and promote the events, and a team focused on snack, lunch, and cleanup. We were sure to thank all of our community partners and volunteers with gift bags and acknowledgement in our newsletter. I'll send it back to Gabriel.
Thank you, Venture. So we're going to move on to promotions. Once our partners were confirmed, we shifted our focus to promoting the summit. So getting youth registered, we utilize social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to reach a broad audience quickly and cost effectively. In addition, we leverage targeted ads, so event pages like Eventbrite, and engaging content like polls that we're doing today, countdowns, live Q&A sessions to increase interaction. We were regularly posting and using relevant hashtags, which also significantly boosted our visibility. We supplemented our online efforts with direct community outreach by distributing flyers in high traffic areas such as businesses, libraries, parks, and schools, places youth recommended during our input session. They are the experts, and we want to hear from their peers about the events where they want to be at. So we followed their guidance. We went to face-to-face interactions at local events, which helped us build personal connections and encourage new youth to attend. Additionally, we engaged with local print media, radio stations, and TV channels by sending out press releases to generate a little bit more media interest as well. Then we move on into planning for treats, refreshments, and healthy options. You definitely want to have healthy options there because we are dealing with the student population. If you give them a lot of sweets, who knows what could happen. So we're looking for partners who could donate their time and host workshops. We also actively sought out local vendors and businesses for sponsorships. This is an excellent strategy for securing refreshments and food for your event, especially when you have little to no program funds or funding limitations that don't allow for you to purchase like food, or many don't allow for incentives here at IPS. So we had to we had to get kind of creative, especially when it comes to working with youth. So what we did was we connected with city councils, neighborhood councils, and HOAs. A lot of us have those in our neighborhoods. It's a great option for gaining community support and resources. These entities provide valuable endorsement and promotional opportunities. Now, for our Youth Summit, the Swift Youth Summit, we secured a $1,000 in-kind donation from the city of Culver City. So I want to thank Culver City if they're on this call today. Their contribution, that $1,000 in-kind donation, their contribution covered the city's promotion of the events across multiple platforms. So including their social media channels, local news outlets and television spots broadcast throughout the city of Culver City. In addition, they provided us with a professional photographer to capture key moments on the day of the event. We also received accommodation from another city council that we used to leverage to promote the summit even more. And then we went on, we partnered with one of the health focused organizations. So when you're thinking about partnering with health focused organizations, think of like farmers markets. They can provide refreshing health conscious options for attendees. For example, when we were able to provide free smoothies to everyone who attended from our partners at Lifeway. So Lifeway, thank you. We provided lunch as well. So for our lunch, we chose Subway sandwiches, which provide a variety of meal options and enhance the overall experience. We collaborate with these local vendors, not only to ensure quality refreshments, but also to strengthen community support for our event. Go ahead and pass it over to Venture.
Thank you, Gabriel. So let's take a look at the day of our event. This is what our agenda looked like for the Youth Summit. We did have an hour for folks to check in, although I will say most students didn't arrive until 5 to 10 minutes before the event, or in reality, up to like 15 minutes into the event start time. So we did end up having to shift things around a little bit, shorten the length of our keynote speaker. We had allotted 45 minutes, ended up being more like 30 minutes for the keynote speaker, but that was all right. It worked out just fine. We had then a 45-minute workshop session, half an hour for our Subway lunch, another workshop session, a speakers panel, and then we closed out with some prizes. For the workshops, we had a selection of 5 workshops that students could attend, 2 that were focused on substance misuse prevention, and 3 that focused on alternatives to substance misuse. Students were asked to select one from each category within the 2 workshop sessions. The titles of the workshops were Risks of Underage Drinking and Cannabis Use, The Fentanyl Crisis and the Life-Saving Power of Narcan, Mental Health and Me, Self-Care and Self-Esteem, Creative Writing for Self-Expression, and The Art of Documentary. It was required by our program deliverable goals that there be an included focus on substance use prevention, but students selected which substances they wanted to learn about. Ideas for other workshops on alternatives to substance use were also supplied by students for whom mental health was an especially important topic. All right, back to you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Venture. Strategies to increase participation. When hosting youth events, we think it's important to help fill the quiet time, because some youth, they don't feel comfortable in quiet spaces or by themselves. So it's important to build in opportunities for engagement and meeting others. When it came down to the day of the event, we were grateful to find our partners were interested in hosting resource tables. So this helped to create an inviting environment from the start and even to the end of it. Youth were invited to connect with a couple of resource tables as they checked in and took part in some of the activities, including voting on which images they thought were AI generated or which ones were real. Now, during lunch, one of the partners had had materials for the youth to make paper flowers, which it turned out really good. This was just an activity that helped disconnect from the technology. So we asked them to put their phones away and participate in this paper flyer program. And they actually did a really good job. I wish we could show a picture of it. It was really nice. With any event, though, I think we all can acknowledge there will be challenges. One challenge we experienced was getting our youth to participate, to voluntarily go into the substance use prevention workshops, because they found the other topics more appealing. To make sure that there were enough students in each workshop and that the guest speakers workshops were prioritized, we end up cutting the workshop that we personally were putting on, which was the Narcan and fentanyl workshop. But don't worry, we'll probably bring it back when our next youth summit. We then divided up the students to make sure that everyone attended an alcohol and cannabis workshop in either their first or their second session. After both workshop sessions and our lunch break, we invited all the speakers from the workshops and the keynotes to join us for a speakers panel, which was moderated by one of our visionary leaders in action students with questions generated from members of VLA. We ended the day on a positive note by having a series of giveaways for gift cards and thank the students for being there. Now, to boost engagement and drive participation, we offered a variety of incentives. Every youth who attended received one entry into our giveaway, and we introduced a referral rewards to encourage word of mouth promotion, giving an additional entry for each friend they brought. So one extra ticket per friend. To keep participation engaged throughout the day, we scheduled the giveaway for the end of the event, which I encourage folks to do as well. But what we also did is we displayed a prize on the sign-in table, so when they walked in, and that kind of built incitement and motivated attendance. These strategies aim to increase engagement, attract more participants, and create a vibrant environment atmosphere. So we can appreciate that. Now we move on to debriefing. And this is important, everybody. Gathering feedback is crucial, not only for data you may need to submit to your funders, but also to inform the planning for future events. We encourage you to collect as much feedback as possible from all participants. After any event, it's always good to allow a couple of days for rest for the staff. It's much deserved and definitely is much needed. Venture and I can attest to that. But don't forget to go ahead and schedule that debriefing meeting. Ideally, you should plan for it to, take place before you take place before the event. So share guiding questions with your teams and partners. If that's not feasible, which in a case of you can always create feedback forms, or you can always create feedback forms. For instance, during our Swift Youth Summit, we collected feedback through surveys with our youth participants, verbal feedback from our partners, and kind of this is what we learned. The majority of attendees rated their experience positively, with most giving us a 4 out of 5. Both of the 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 is what they gave us. Both of the substance use prevention workshops and creative workshops were highly valued by participants. The youth found that resources provided to be very helpful. Attendees particularly enjoyed the keynote speaker, the open and honest discussion, and the opportunity to connect with others. Some even expressed interest in joining our ongoing youth leadership groups like the Visionary Leaders in Action, or VLA, which is back here. You can see the logo there. Participants suggested incorporating more hands-on activities. We had a couple, but they wanted more. Improving time management, and providing a greater variety of food options. So, like I said, we had the Subway, we had the smoothies, but they wanted a variety of more options. In our debriefing, we compared these outcomes with the initial goals from the Youth Summit, including attendance and engagement to assess the success of the event. We also reviewed feedback data, registration numbers, and participation trends that identify both key successes and areas that we needed to improve on. From there, we recommend creating a comprehensive report that summarizes the event's performance, highlighting key metrics and feedback like those we've already gathered previously. Share this report with staff, team members, or stakeholders to ensure transparency and collaboration. Finally, identify strategies that worked well and can be replicated for future events. And make note of challenges so you can go ahead and adjust those in the future. This debriefing process will guide you to inform decisions, help you plan in future events more effectively, especially if you're like us. We have continued programming throughout the year. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Gabriel. So taking those insights into account, I think another key component of creating successful youth-led events is really empowering the youth to take charge of advocacy efforts. So for sustainable community change, it is crucial that we equip youth with the skills and the confidence that they need in order to advocate for themselves and their community. So we'll be talking a little bit about youth advocacy and policy influence. So starting off with some advocacy training. In order for youth to create positive and sustainable community change that is responsive to their needs, adult allies should be very intentional about identifying capacity building opportunities that increase youth knowledge and comfortability to advocate at the local, state, and federal level. So I know we've been using the term adult ally throughout the presentation. We just want to give a quick definition that an adult ally is a trusted adult who supports, advocates for, and works with young people. So with that, if you guys want to take a couple seconds to answer this question of what do you believe is the most important role of an adult ally when working with youth? Perfect. So to provide, I think everyone said to provide guidance and mentorship, as well as creating a safe space for youth voices. So the important role can be all of these really, but I think it's important to sort of see where you're at in your advocacy efforts or just in your program as a whole to see, which one aligns with it better. So going into the policy and advocacy training and all of that, one of the most effective ways to empower youth in this endeavor is through comprehensive advocacy training, focusing on essential techniques and strategies that can drive real world impact. So an essential component of our training is teaching youth how to influence policy. So policy is it's not just about raising awareness, right? It's about creating actionable goals and delivering a clear message that resonates with decision makers. So by engaging in structured advocacy efforts, youth can learn to navigate political landscapes and effectively communicate their needs and concerns. So one amazing resource that we have leaned into here in San Diego County is a curriculum developed by our partners at CHIP, or Community Health Improvement Partners, called the Resident Leadership Academy, or RLA. So RLA is essentially a community advocate training, or what we like to think of as a public health degree in 10 weeks for community members of all ages and identities who wish to improve community health, safety, and overall the quality of life. So towards the end of the 10-week training, participants work together to identify a community improvement project that would positively impact their neighborhood, community, school, and other aspects of their life. So IPS also provides youth members with Speak Well spokesperson training that trains them to craft their messages and become effective advocates by writing editorial or opinion pieces to submit to the news outlet. And speaking to media or making presentations to a city council, school board, planning commission, or just any other decision-making body. And if you are interested in learning more about these resources, Sam has shared in the chat a link to the RLA curriculum and how to learn more about the Speak Well training that we offer here at IPS as part of our training and technical assistance. So going into advocacy, it's not a one size fits all approach, right? It is crucial to recognize the different phases or the different needs of advocacy efforts, whether it's building initial awareness or mobilizing community support or just engaging in direct policy advocacy. Throughout our training, we do emphasize the importance of adapting strategies to fit the current phase of advocacy, ensuring that efforts remain effective and responsive to the evolving changes. And then moving into an important aspect, a critical aspect of advocacy is to set clear and actionable goals, right? And being able to communicate them effectively. So before any public event or any public action, I think it's really important to set up meetings with youth to align on the message and to ensure that everyone understands their objectives. So empowering youth to speak on important issues builds their confidence and articulates a clear message. That's just a cornerstone of our training approach, right? So our youth advocacy training incorporates practical examples to illustrate effective techniques and strategies. For instance, participants from our last Youth Resident Leadership Academy, or RLA, have successfully transitioned into initiatives like the Clean Coast Collaborative. So at the end of our Youth RLA in 2023, participants narrowed down one issue impacting their community's health and access to outdoor spaces. So along with identifying the concern, the group also identified partners involved in the advocacy efforts as either supporters or opponents. So this would give them a holistic perspective of their selected community improvement project and all of the work that they need in order to get there. So the Youth and Youth in Actions 2023 RLA chose the environmental crisis in Imperial Beach and Tijuana River Valley as their community improvement project. So some folks might be aware of this issue, but for those of you who aren't, this is an issue that has impacted both communities on both sides of the border, in San Diego and in Tijuana, who share the Tijuana watershed that leads into the Pacific Ocean. So this crisis has grown over the past 30 years due to a combination of filling treatment plants that leak untreated water into the Tijuana River estuary and Imperial Beach, a lack of funding, urgency, coordination, as well as climate change has left one of the most accessible beaches, Imperial Beach, to be closed for over 1,000 consecutive days. So although this issue is complex and it is binational, this group of young people has intentionally met every other week since January of this year with the support of Youth in Action's program staff. And although it can be a heavy lift, it's just as crucial for adult allies who are supporting the young people to share their work in spaces that are primarily for adults, right? So getting the young people's voices and their hopes into the conversation to initiate and build partnerships that they can support youth's work is one of the main goals of an adult ally. So we're going to move into a little timeline. And throughout the past 9 months, the youth leaders and staff have adapted to different phases of advocacy work. So in May, the youth were actually invited by our partners to participate in California's Ocean Day in Sacramento. There, they spoke with legislators and their staffers, and they shared their story and their why. The Clean Coast Collaborative has also worked to develop a clear mission and vision. They've written letters of support for certain bills in California. They've hosted beach cleanups, they've participated in photo voice exhibitions, they've conducted research, and they've authored opinion pieces to submit to news outlets, and they've spoken to media, and they're currently developing a social media campaign. So our Clean Coast Collaborative social media campaign is actively engaging the community and raising awareness. So we're utilizing targeted messages and impactful content to build support for environmental issues. And even though it's been such a short time since the start, the CCC's efforts has led to significant wins pushing legislation addressing our core issues. So our work has garnered notable media coverage, which has amplified our message, and we've gained recognition from various organizations, and the youth have learned skills that will support them for a lifetime. And I do invite you all to explore some of the powerful work that they've done. I think there's going to be links in the chat, including a recently published op-ed in the San Diego Union Tribune and coverage by our local media outlet. And it's just an incredible way to showcase all of their dedication and passion for environmental advocacy. And with that, I'll hand it back to Brittany.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and to Venture and Gabriel as well for sharing all of your insights and knowledge and lessons learned when working with youth. I know it's difficult. I too have worked in the youth space, and it can be hard. And I think it's important to acknowledge, the challenges that come with working with youth, and just really collectively build this driving force of adult allies that can come together, share resources, share knowledge to really work with youth across the nation. So I am sharing here our presenters' contact information. Before we head into the Q&A of today's webinar, I do ask folks to just take a minute or two to fill out our webinar evaluation. Thank you, Sam, for dropping the link in the chat. We also have a QR code here. If you prefer to scan that with your phone, you can do that. The link will also be shared when you close out of Zoom, and then will be shared again in case you missed it when we send out an email later this week. As I mentioned, a link to the recording slide deck, and resources that our presenters shared will be emailed out by the end of this week. And also want to note that IPS does offer training and technical assistance. You heard our presenters talk about the Speak Well spokesperson's training. Sorry, it's a mouthful. And so we also offer other trainings from all of our core competencies. And so if you are interested, you can reach us at info@publicstrategies.org, or you can reach out to myself, and I will share my email in the chat shortly. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and jump into Q&A. Just give me a second as I bring those questions up. Encourage you all, if you have questions, type them in, and we'll get to as many as we can in the next 10 minutes. So our first question is, our youth are having a difficult time figuring out what to do. How do you help them without guiding them or holding their hand through it, so that they can feel confident and take initiative, especially to youth who are not used to taking a leadership role and used to the teacher giving them instructions instead? So I think all of you can definitely speak to this. I'm going to toss it to Jennifer first, because I feel like she's very much in the thick of this, and the Clean Coast Collaborative has been really gaining a lot of momentum since she's been with us. So Jennifer, if you want to start, and then Gabriel, Venture, if you want to jump in, we can do it that way.
Yeah, of course. It's very difficult to get them interested in some things. I will say that what has worked for us, or what we've seen so far, is just being very honest with them that we do want to see them take ownership, right? Have some maybe interactive activities to help them brainstorm. That's what we've done using platforms like, what is it? The Menti presentation, where you can do a word cloud, maybe just giving everyone sticky notes and writing down something they find important, right? And then just getting them to brainstorm as much as everything, giving them really no guidance at first. And then as all the youth start to see like maybe some similarities, or maybe they'll see a youth write something about an environmental issue, right? And they're like, oh, I'm interested in that as well. So just giving them a space where they can truly brainstorm without feeling like there's a wrong or right answer, right? So I think interactive activities like that have definitely worked in order just to get the initial like portion of it in identifying at least an issue or something to do.
I agree with Jennifer. I think that open-ended questions are really important. I think it's okay, especially if you're working with younger students like middle schoolers, to give them some ideas as well. Like after they've done, definitely do that open-ended initial brainstorming session to try to get the ideas flowing, but then you can give them some suggestions like we did in our the multiple choice question that I suggested. Give them a wide range. We could do this. Here's what that would look like if you're interested, or we could do that and here's what that could look like, but we would want you to take charge, and then go ahead and ask them more open-ended questions about why they may or may not be interested in a certain option. So I think it's okay to provide some guidance as long as they're still the ones at the end making the decisions.
Gabriel, looks like you're talking, but you are muted.
Yeah, unmute. Thank you. It said it was unmute, but I'll mute. I have to agree with Venture and Jennifer, but I think you have to really listen to the students. The listening sessions, the focus group really helped us. Now we did have some guiding questions, but when you can try to find those students that are very interested in public health, and keep in mind, let's just be honest. Substance use and substance prevention, it's not a sexy subject, so you got to kind of make it creative for them, and you got to meet the students where they're at. We go to events. We encourage them to come to events with us. When we went to before the city councils, we encouraged the youth to come with us. Let them have a buy-in, let them have some type of ownership, and you'll see a little bit of change in them. You'll see that they want to be a part of it as well. But definitely listen to what they have to say.
Definitely agree with you all. And I think one thing when it comes to like campaign building or picking an initiative that youth want to work on, I've found that having a curriculum like the Resident Leadership Academy that Jennifer spoke to provides that structure and framework that is really helpful for us as facilitators, because I think we are not always the experts, right? Like, I don't think we kind of expected, but weren't really sure that the youth that Jennifer is working with wanted to dive into environmental justice. Like, that's not necessarily our wheelhouse. And so leaning into like curriculums like the Resident Leadership Academy that do provide some of that structure on how they can build a campaign and how they can identify, I think helps push them a little bit further, while also offering some guidance for the adult allies who are working with them. And then also, I encourage you all to lean into partners who are experts in the field. I know when Jennifer spoke earlier, she mentioned, the youth came up with a list of organizations or partners that are working towards this initiative already. How can they connect with them? How can they learn from them? How can staff learn from them? And so I think that's a great tool as well that I just kind of wanted to reiterate from the presentation earlier. Okay, so let's look at the question. So I think you kind of touched on this, Venture, but wanted to open it up to see if anyone had any additional points to add. We had a question about if these tips apply to middle and high school students, and I think yes, they do, but I also think that strategies might differ for middle school and high school students, and want to see if any of our presenters have some feedback they can provide on what might, where you might need to adjust when it comes to working with middle and high school age youth.
I will say that we've worked with both populations, and we're currently working with the middle schoolers now. With the middle schoolers, I think you have to have more games, and you have to be a little bit more creative to keep them engaged. So like workshops, games, food for sure, incentives, if you can. With the high schoolers, you got to pivot just a slight, just a bit, and you got to think about, what's affecting them, and these are topics that we talk about with our youth, relationships, college prep, bullying. These are subjects that are more that the students in high school are a little bit more interested in, and so you got to kind of meet them with where they're at. But those are subjects, and those are things that they kind of slightly differ. But those are some techniques and tools that I would give working with those two different populations.
Thank you, Gabriel. So when you do have youth coalitions or youth groups that are coming together and you are working with, different, whether it's middle school and high school, a combination of both, some folks are seeing that they have a group with a lot of younger youth. And so there's maybe one youth who is older, who's feeling a little bit isolated, or having youth who are just really shy. And so how do you engage those youth who might be feeling isolated because of their age? They're not part of that larger collective. Um, Ensuring that they keep showing up and feel involved, and then also encouraging engagement from those who are shy and are struggling to come out of their shell.
I'd say that for if you've got older students who are isolated, there's a real opportunity to tap on them as leaders and really talk to them about what their potential is to be a role model for the younger students. And you can have a one-on-one with them to really talk about how they're feeling, how they're doing, and how they could step up. And that's also just a great opportunity for them to learn and grow. I think when it comes to engaging students who are shy, I think it's important to have a variety of engagement opportunities so it's not all just speaking in a big group. Can you have discussion sections in pairs? Can you have written reflections that they hand in or share individually? And then just to break the ice, I'm a big fan of theater games. Find them online, find someone in your organization who was a theater kid. There's probably at least one. And you can break the ice with things that get kids into their bodies and feeling silly, and laughing is a great way to get them open to answering other questions.
Thank you, Venture. Great question here about listening sessions. When do you recommend hosting a listening session? Beginning, middle, or end of the year? Jennifer, I'm going to go to you because I know that with your program, it is required by the funder to host a listening session annually. But do you have any recommendations? And then we can hear from Venture and Gabriel as well.
Yeah, of course. I think for listening sessions, in order to get like the most useful information of like how your program's going and what the youth are thinking, I think maybe middle towards end of the year is your best option, just because hopefully by that time you'll have maybe a couple of youth that you're already very familiar with. So you'll be able to get some feedback from youth you're currently working with and youth you would like to work with, or youth that aren't really like aware of your programming maybe, but they want to give some advice or some feedbacks of what works. So I think definitely middle to end of the year would work better than doing it at the beginning.
I do want to be mindful of time. I do see one question in here that we didn't talk about. And so if it's okay, I'd like to answer it. Someone asked about permission to participate. And so I assume this is like permission slips or waivers. I know we at IPS have a template that we use. We can definitely share that out as a resource in the follow-up email. So I'll be sure to include that. But I did want to address that because that is something that we have to have working with any youth under 18. We do collect some information, making sure that we have parent contact information and permission from their guardian to participate in our activities. So we can share that out as a template, absolutely, and a follow-up. So it is 11 o'clock. It is on the hour, and I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. I want to thank our attendees for being here today. It was so great to see so many names in the room and numbers. It's great to have you. We encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and just stay engaged with IPS. And want to give a huge shout out to Sam, who is on the back end, really helping support the chat and make sure everything runs smoothly. And then absolutely, of course, to our presenters, Gabriel, Jennifer, and Venture. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your knowledge with the group today. Have a wonderful Wednesday and a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. Thank you.